Hello guys, in this video I'm going to show you how to create your own EFI folder which you can use for Hackintosh installation. The EFI folder should work either you're using macOS, Big Sur, Ventura or the latest version Sonoma. I've got a lot of requests from you guys on how to create EFI since the EFI for every person is different based on their hardware. So in this guide we are going to be walking through each and every step on how to create EFI that should work based on your hardware. So we're going to be using the Dortania guide which is over here. The link to everything used in this video will be provided in the video description, so you can get it directly from there and then proceed. So let's get started. Now you can see the prerequisites we need, and the most important thing here is time and patience. You really have to be patient and follow every step, and you should be able to create an EFI that works for your system. Next, we need to know our CPU name and the generation, the code name, and also our GPU. Now, to check your CPU name or code name, hold Ctrl+Shift+Escape key and it should open Task Manager. Now on Task Manager, you can click on Performance and you should see your CPU over here. Now you can see in my case, this is Intel Core i5 4570 CPU. 4570 means it is a 4th generation Core i5 CPU. So we can just head to Google and search for 4th gen CPU, and the name of 4th gen CPU is called Haswell. So the code name for my system is Haswell. Now this may be different depending on your CPU, but it should work regardless. Now you can read through every other thing here, but let's just dive right in. We can go to the hardware limitations as well, and then we can check CPU support and GPU support. Now not every CPU is supported and not every GPU is supported as well, but you should be able to install with both Intel CPU and AMD CPU. So you may want to read through these to check if your CPU is supported or not. So you can read through the introduction page if you want, but we're just gonna head with creating an EFI since that is what we want. First, we need to download the latest version of Opencore. So click on creating the USB, and then you can see Opencore package over here. Right click, and it should open on GitHub. And then we can scroll down to download the latest version, which is currently version 0.9.3. Download the release. Opencore downloaded. Now let's open our download folder. Okay, so let me just move the file directly to my download folder. Now let's extract Opencore folder. Extract files. So from here, we're going to open the folder we extracted and then open x64. Now the only thing we need from here is EFI folder right here, since we are trying to create an EFI we are going to use for the installation. So we're just going to cut this since that is just what we need, and then paste it here. I can delete this. Now if you open the EFI, you can see OC and boot. If we open OC, we can see some files over here which we are going to make changes to, adjust and work with. So this is the EFI folder which we will be working on. Now after extracting the folder, we don't really need everything there. So let's go through this guide over here. And you can see in our boot directory in our EFI, the only thing we need is boot x64.efi. Every other thing there is not really needed. So we can delete that. And then scroll down. And this is what our EFI folder should look like. So in the boot directory, you should have just boot x64.efi, and then in the OC folder under ACPI should be empty for now. Under drivers, the only thing we need here is open runtime.efi. Every other thing here should be deleted. So I have just open runtime.efi, every other thing deleted. Then in the text should be empty for now. Under tools, we should have just OpenShell.efi. Every other thing should be deleted as well. And then lastly, we can remove content flavor and content visibility. So this is how it should look like, just like in the image over here. So we delete whatever we don't need, and then we can proceed with gathering files and then starting the configuration of our EFI. Now we can begin gathering files by clicking on gathering files. Now the first thing we need is our firmware drivers. So click on firmware drivers and it should take you down here, and you can see these are required firmware drivers. HFS plus.efi, which we're going to click on. and then we should download from GitHub. We're just gonna click on downloaded. Okay, and we also need openruntime.efi. We already have openruntime.efi, so we don't really have to download again. So if you open our drivers, you can see openruntime.efi. But let's copy HFS we just downloaded.efi. I'm just gonna cut it EFI, OC, and then drivers. Then we're gonna paste it there. So under drivers, we should have openruntime.efi and hfs+.efi. Now this is for majority of systems. We only need 2 of the EFI drivers to get it up and running. But if you're not using UEFI and you're using legacy, then you may have to read through this, which is actually not the case because most of the newly built systems are running with UEFI. Now we can scroll down to Kext. These are like drivers that makes your system function as it should. The first thing we have to get here is Lilu, which is a required Kext. As you can see the description over here, a Kext to patch many processes required for Apple ALC, WhatsApp Green, Virtual SMC, and many others. So let's download Lilu. Open a new tab. And then download the release. Now open our download folder. You're just going to extract it. Extract Lilu. And then open the extracted folder. The only thing we need here is lilu.kext. So we're just going to cut it. Head back to our EFI folder. OC under Kext. And then we paste it right there. Head back to our guide. What next? Virtual SMC, which is also required. So we're going to open that as well. Now this is required if you're running macOS version 10 and above. So if you're running Big Sur, Ventura, or Sonoma, you definitely need this. So we're going to download that as well. Download the release. We're done with that. Open our folder. Locate our downloaded file, which is Virtual SMC. Extract. Open the folder. Kext. And what we need here, let's go back to our guide. So you can see for Virtual SMC, SMC processor.kext is used for monitoring Intel CPU temperatures and it's not for AMD CPUs. So if you are using an AMD CPU, then you don't need SMC processor.kext. SMC AMD processor is what you would need in that case. Now you can see lots of options here. This depends on your CPU. Firstly, you need Virtual SMC, and then in my case, I am using an Intel based processor, which most of you are using as well. So we're going to get SMC processor.kext, and then I'm also going to get SMC superio.kext, which is used to monitor the fan speed, and this is not for AMD CPU. So you just have to check accordingly based on your hardware over here. If you're using an AMD CPU, then you have to get SMC AMD processor, which supports AMD CPU. So we're just going to go through these, and whichever is needed, we can get it. Now you can always update your Kext even after the installation. If there is something that's not working, you can head back to the guide and then download other Kext updates and you should be good. So these are the 3 I need. So I'm just going to cut it. Head to our EFI folder. And then paste it there. So we have Lilu, Virtual SMC, SMC processor, and SMC superio. Now we can head to the next thing, which is our graphics. And for graphics, what we need is whatever green, and that works for graphics patching, DRM fix, board ID, and so much more. So we're just gonna download that from GitHub as well. Download the release. Okay, now head to our download folder. Extract whatever green. And then get the Kext as well. I'm gonna cut it. EFI, OC, and then Kext. Paste it there. Now the next thing is audio. If you're using a laptop, that is when you would require this. But since I'm using a desktop and I'm actually not using an internal audio sound card. I'm connecting to an external audio option, so I wouldn't really need Apple ALC, but you might have to download it. I mean, it doesn't cost anything, you just have to download it as well. So let's just download it. So you can see it allows support for majority of onboard sound controllers. So let's add it to our text as well. Apple ALC. Let's copy Apple ALC.text. Now the main thing is just reading through the instructions and making sure everything is in check, because from our instruction you can see over here it requires OS X 10.4 or newer. So if you're using an older version, then you really don't need this. This should only be needed if you're using a newer version from 10.4 upward. So that is it. We have our audio text as well. For Ethernet, we need to confirm what we are using on our PC before we download anything. So we can head to our search bar and then search for device manager, and then under network adapters you should see Ethernet, and you can see the model right there. We can even check the properties and you can see 1217 LM. Now if you check here, you can see for Internet mouse it is required for majority of the Intel NIC chipsets, and you can see some of the NICs that are officially supported, which in my case 217 is also supported. So we can download Intel mouse. But then there are also lots of other options over here based on your Ethernet card, so you just have to go with what works for your hardware. So in my case, I'm going to download Intel mouse, which should be the same for most of you. Download the release. Let's add the text. So this is what we need, Intel mouse.text. Just ignore every other thing. Call that EFI OC text. Let's paste that there. What else do we need? Ethernet. And for USB, we're just going to go with USB 2 box, and that should be okay. So just go to the text and scroll down. You can see the release tab over here. Click on it, and then you can download the release, the latest version. Downloaded. Let's go back to our download folder, extract the folder as well. USB 2 box. Get the USB 2 box text and the default text as well. Let's cut it and then head to our text, paste it there. And for Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, we just have to go with a text based on our Wi-Fi card as well. In this case, you can see Bluetooth patch for macOS 12 and above, and we need Bluetooth fix-up, and that is for non-native Bluetooth cards, and it shouldn't be used on macOS 11 or earlier. Then for Wi-Fi, you can see different Wi-Fi options based on our Wi-Fi card. So if you're using an Intel wireless card, this is your best bet, AirPods Wi-Fi text, and that should work. Now this is for Bluetooth and this is for Wi-Fi. This is another option if AirPort LT LWM doesn't work. And we can also see Intel Bluetooth firmware as well, which also adds Bluetooth support. But most of these kegs requires macOS 10 and above. So if you want to install on anything less than macOS version 10, then you don't really need any of this. So we're going with this and the Bluetooth fix-up. Now you can see for the AirPort Wi-Fi, different versions based on the version of macOS you are to install. If we are going with macOS Ventura, then we should download the stable version for macOS Ventura. If we are going for Monterey, then we should go with it. We can also go with the stable version. Now it doesn't mean this won't work if you're running maybe macOS Sonoma, since this hasn't been updated for macOS Sonoma. This should still work. So I'm just going to download the stable text, which I would advise you to download as well. And for the Bluetooth patch, we are going to download the release, which is the latest version right now. Now we can close this, head to our folder. I think I'm just going to delete some of these we don't need, so it doesn't just cloud up the entire space. Now let's extract the Bluetooth patch and the Wi-Fi as well. Get the text, head to our EFI folder, paste it there. Same thing for the Bluetooth. We're just going to use Bluetooth injector. We should inject Bluetooth hardware data into our configuration file. So let's just get Bluetooth injector and then paste it in our text. Now if you're using a Bluetooth or a Wi-Fi card that Apple supports, then you don't really need any of this. So if your Wi-Fi card or Bluetooth is supported by Apple by default, then you don't really need this patch or Bluetooth extra text. We can just proceed. Now let's check the extra, and these are extra options based on your hardware, but we are good with that. Now the next thing we want to do is building our SSDT. Now there are pre-made SSDT which we can use, but I would recommend you build it with your system. Earlier I checked the code name associated with our system, which in my case it was Haswell. So we would be needing SSDT based on our CPU code name. So for Haswell we need SSDT plug and SSDT EC. For Broadwell it is the same thing. For Skylake you need SSDT plug and SSDT EC USB-X. So you have to match the code name with the SSDT you need. So for the SSDT, this is the pre-built SSDT which you can just download and then proceed. But it comes with lots of unnecessary things which we don't really need. So you can see actually this is the SSDT plug which you can download, and then you can skip this step. But we're just going to build this by ourselves. So in this case, we're going to download SSDTTime. So let's just search for SSDTTime. And then we can just go to the code section and download the zip. Download, close. Let's close this. Open our download folder. Extract SSDTTime. Now let's open SSDTTime. Open. And then run this file over here, SSDTTime, which is a batch file. Just double click on it and it should run. First we have to go through what we need, and in this case it is SSDT plug for Haswell and SSDT EC. So first we're going to use P to automatically dump the system DSDT. P and then hit enter. Next, we're going to go with creating plugin type, which is our SSDT plug, by entering 5, enter, hit enter to return. And then the next thing we also have to generate is fake EC, which is also one of the requirements, SSDT EC. That is number 2. Hit enter, and then hit enter to return. Now we can use Q to quit. And we can head to our folder, and you can see a new folder called results over here. This contains what we need. In this case we need SSDT plug.aml and SSDTEC.aml. Every other thing there is not needed, so I'm just going to cut both of them. Download, head to our EFI folder, OC, and then head to ACPI and then paste it right there. So these are the two ACPI SSDT we need. You could also go with the pre-built ones if you really don't want to go through this extra step, but I would recommend you do this yourself. For SSDT, this is for desktop. If you come down, you're also going to see for high-end desktop and for laptops as well. So it depends on which platform you're on and what you're using. So everything actually depends on your hardware and what you're using basically, but it should work regardless of whatever you're using. Now let's scroll up a bit and then click on creating the USB, and you should see ProperTree over here, which we have to download. So right click on ProperTree, and then it should take you to GitHub code, and then let's download zip. Start download. Downloaded. Now let's close this. Open our download folder. Download. And there is ProperTree. Now let's extract ProperTree. And then open the extracted folder. And you should see these files over here. Now we're going to need ProperTree, but first let's head to our Opencore extracted folder, which we got in the beginning of this video, and then go to docs. Now we need config.plist, but then there is a sample here which we can use. So let's just copy the sample and then head to our EFI which we're working on, OC, and then paste the sample configuration file there, sample, and then rename it to config. This is our configuration file. Okay, now we can open ProperTree. So head to our compressed folder or wherever ProperTree is, open it, open, and then run the Windows batch file ProperTree. Now this needs you to have Python already installed, so if you get any sort of error, then just install Python and you should be able to continue. Now click on File and then click on Open. Now locate our EFI folder we are working on, EFI, OC, and then select the configuration plist we just renamed. Now open, and it should open with just random data here, since this is just a sample configuration file. Now click on File again and then click on OC Clean Snapshot. Now select OC folder inside the EFI we are working on, in our case EFI, and then select OC folder, then click on Select Folder, and it should replace the dummy details here with new details we just updated with. Now we can delete these first 4 columns. These are just warnings. We can delete, and then File, Save. Now we really have to work with the configuration, so let's head back to our guide and then scroll all the way down. Now this is where it gets a little bit tricky. We are going with the configs over here by the left, so select your CPU code name from here. In my case it is Haswell. In your case it may be different depending on your hardware. And you can see a note for me right here: Haswell iGPUs are only supported up to macOS 12. So anything more than macOS 12, Haswell integrated GPUs won't work. So in this guide you can see we need ProperTree, which we already have. We need configuration plist file, which we already have. Next we also need GenSMBIOS, which I'm just going to download now. Code and then download zip. Okay. Now you just have to follow the guide based on your CPU. So let's scroll down. So let's open our configuration plist and keep it by the side. So you can see first under ACPI you should have SSDT plug and SSDT EC, which we have here following the instructions. Now let's scroll all the way down to device properties over here. Okay, so this is device properties. Now we need to set a device property. So let's just drop down this so it doesn't really confuse us with too much details here. Okay, so we click on device properties and then we right click on add and then new child under add, and then for the string we're going to paste in this PCI root, the rest of it. So that's the string. Set the data type to dictionary, and then let's right click again, and then we're going to create a new child under that PCI root, and then the child new string is going to be called this, which is AAPL IG platform. Now this is what is used to determine how the iGPU drivers interact with our system. So let's copy that and then paste it as the new string. Set the data type to data, and then for the data, this should be used if you're using your iGPU to drive your display, and then for the second one, this should be used when your iGPU is only used for computing tasks and doesn't drive a display. And then lastly, this should be used when the iGPU is used to drive a display. But in this case, I have a Radeon R7 200 series GPU and our iGPU is not driving the display, so I'm going to go with the second option, and then that is what the value is going to contain. Now if you're using an iGPU that is not supported by macOS, you can see we have to add a new extra item called device ID, which we're going to set up with this value over here that has support in macOS, even if our iGPU doesn't have support for macOS. Okay, so I'm not using an iGPU, so I'm going to skip the frame buffer and all of this. But if you're using an iGPU, then you may want to consider adding this. Let's scroll down. For layout ID, we already have that here. You can see the layout ID and that is totally fine. Scroll down. And then under the kernel, let's go to the section, kernel section here. Kernel. Just make sure you're not editing the wrong block so you don't make any mistake. Okay, so under kernel, you're going to see quirks. Then under quirks, you should see Apple CPU PMCF Glock, enable for 10.10 and older. So if you're planning to run macOS installation on version 10 and older versions, then you should enable. But if you're running it on a newer version of macOS, then you don't really need that. Second option, true. So just modify your configuration based on what we have here. Custom SMBIOS guide, enable for Dell and VAIO systems. This is a Dell PC, so obviously I'm going to enable that. Lapid kernel panic is for HP systems, so leave it that way if you're using a Dell PC. Panic no text, true. So just set everything the way it is here, and then don't forget to Ctrl S when you want to save. Now we can scroll down and you can see documentations based on what we just changed now. So we just have to configure everything based on our PC hardware and the macOS version we are planning to install. So let's go to MISC, and then under debug, Apple debug should be set to true, and then Apple panic should be set to true as well. Target 67. Under security, scan policy 0. Okay, under security here, scan policy should be set to 0. Secure boot model should be set to default, and then vault should be set to optional. Again, this depends on your hardware. This is for Haswell, so if you're using Skylake or any other CPU, don't follow this same guide. Just go through your CPU over here. You can see lots of options over here, Skylake, Sandy Bridge, and so much more. Now we can go down to the boot section. Now we can scroll down, NVRAM. And you should see boot arguments over here. So let's modify this. Debug. And then clear the language field, otherwise it might set up with some languages when we want to start the installation, which we don't really need. Next, platform info. So this is where we need GenSMBIOS. We are going to generate unique serial which we're going to be using to install macOS. So this is going to have a unique serial number, a unique UUID. But then before you generate SMBIOS, you need to know the version that works with the version of macOS you want to install. So there is a guide here. So if we scroll through the left side, we should see under the extra section, choosing the right SMBIOS. Let's open that in a new tab. And you can see CPU type. Now we need to choose the SMBIOS that corresponds or matches closely with our hardware. So let's scroll down and you can see different SMBIOS and the GPU supported. So just check around and you should get one that will be compatible with your hardware. So you can see some special notes about SMBIOS, which says iMac Pro 1,1 and iMac Pro 7,1, which are two of the SMBIOS that usually works, and we can go with any of these two. But then make sure you read through these and check the one that is closest to your hardware. So I'm going to go with iMac Pro 1,1. So let's open our download folder and then locate GenSMBIOS extract. extracted. Now let's open GenSMBIOS master. First, make sure to save your configuration.plist. Let's close it for now, and then run GenSMBIOS Windows batch file. First, let's enter 1 to install and update Mac serial. And then second, enter 2 to select our configuration.plist file. And then let's go to our EFI folder, OC, drag your configuration.plist file and then drop it there. Okay, hit enter. Now we're going to select 3 to generate SMBIOS. Hit enter, and it should generate SMBIOS based on the profile we are giving to it. So in this case, it is iMac Pro 1,1. Hit enter. Done. Hit enter to return. We also need to generate UUID, so let's enter 4. Hit enter. Done. And then lastly, generate ROM 5. Hit enter. Now this should be unique for everyone, so you're not using a serial that someone else is using. Q, and then let's quit. Now let's open ProperTree again. And then access our configuration file again. And if we go down to platform ID, you can see it has been updated iMac Pro 1,1. This is the serial number for our machine. You should keep safe. You shouldn't be sharing with anyone, just like I'm doing. This is not recommended. Now let's copy the serial and check if this is a valid serial or it is associated with a hardware. And then open a new tab. Now search for Apple, check coverage. Now all we need to do is enter our serial there and then type in the code. So if you get an error like this, please enter a valid serial number. This means your generated serial number is correct and it is not associated with any hardware, so we can continue using this serial. But if you get any message showing that this is associated with a hardware, then you have to regenerate again until you get a unique serial that is not associated with any hardware and should give you this error. Now we can close this. Let's scroll down. Now head to UEFI settings, and then the column where it says ignore invalid flex ratio, we are going to change that from false to true, and then save. Now you just have to cross check everything, because just one simple mistake could get you into trouble when trying to boot. So make sure to cross check everything is intact the way it should be, and then you can begin installing macOS with your newly built EFI. So basically that's all, and we have our EFI fully built. Now we can use this to install macOS. It should work with Sonoma, it should work with Big Sur and Ventura, and everything should work properly. So basically this is how to create your EFI from scratch. I made a video on how to complete the installation, so if you're done creating the EFI and you want to continue with the installation, then check the video in the description of this video, which covers how to install macOS Sonoma, how to install macOS Ventura and Big Sur as well. So you just have to create your EFI manually yourself and then watch the video on how to install if you don't know how to do that already. If this video was helpful, kindly hit the subscribe button and turn on your post notification. Thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next one.